Methodist Church.
Glenda Hill, I worship at Flagstaff Federated.
Evie McDonald, I worship at St. Mark's.
Susan Jerstad, worship at St. Mark's.
Noni Dye,
I'm at Trinity United.
Noni Dye, I worship at Shepherd of the Pines in Overgard, Arizona.
Morning,
Karen Ragland, I'm one of the pastors at St. Mark's in Tucson.
good morning.
Linda Larson, I'm a pastor at Page Community United Methodist Church.
David Devereaux, Desert Spring United Methodist Church.
Khalif Smith, Trinity Las Vegas.
Paul Cho at First Church Tucson.
Dave McPherson, my charge is Faith United Methodist.
Ed Denham, St. Paul's, Tucson.
Kent Olson, Dayspring, Tempe.
This is Joel, Shirley, and Bonnie chiming in from Dayspring.
Steve Goldstein, Trinity United Methodist, Las Vegas.
Meredith Schubert, St. Paul's, Tucson.
Good morning, this is David Rennick at North Scottsdale Church.
Okay, most of you have had the opportunity to share who you are and where you're from. And now we are going to dive into observations from the next team. So if those of you who were participants in UMC Next, if you would take a moment to introduce yourself and where you are primarily engaged in ministry, and then go ahead and just give us a couple sentences about your experience at Next and what that was like. So again, my name is Beth Rambikur. I serve in ministry as your Director of Connectional Ministries. And one of the most interesting observations for me about Next was how hungry people were for an experience that just let them have conversation about what happened at General Conference and give them some power to do something about it. And these were not the traditional people I see everywhere at different events. So it was cool to see a totally new group of people engaged in conversations about the connectional future of the church.
Kimberly Scott. Sharon Ragland at St. Mark's in Tucson, and I'm going to echo what Beth said about being with people from across the country. The eye-opening thing, though, was how many more and in-depth conversations we've had in the West than is the case in some other parts of the country. So really, for some people, this was their first go-around with this kind of a conversation. That was eye-opening. It also was both eye-opening and hard to hear from people at my table that they're the only one in their area, like Southern Indiana or West Virginia, who are open to having a conversation like this. So people across the country are in many different places, and that has joys and challenges. And I also left with a lot of hope for work we can do together.
Hi, Kimberly Scott, Crossroads UMC. I also left UMNext feeling very hopeful that, because I feel like the train has finally left the station. I think for a long time we've been talking about walking into being a new church, and I feel like UMNext proved that we are actually making some progress. And it was also very helpful to see how much further ahead we are in the West, and how we could kind of lead the church through this, into this process of what's going to be new coming.
David Devereaux at Desert Spring United Methodist Church in Las Vegas. I was hopeful going to the event, but also a bit apprehensive, not knowing really what would be involved once we arrived. I was really pleased to find out that there was not some plan that had already been created simply to sign off on, but rather that there was something, a process in place that around which we could have real meaningful conversations. And that was very encouraging to me. And it was, I left very, very hopeful that 600 people in such a short amount of time could agree on some negotiables when it comes to how we want to move forward as a denomination. I was also very, very encouraged. Usually the Western jurisdiction is kind of written off by other jurisdictions across our country. But in this event, we were looked to as leaders because we're so much further ahead in these conversations and in this work than many of the other jurisdictions. And I just found that really encouraging.
I also share what Pastor Dave just said. The thing that I take away was how much our friends and colleagues in other annual conferences were really grateful. They would thank me just because I was part of our conference, Desert Southwest Conference. Also recognizing many people looking to and hearing from our bishop, Bishop Bob, and what his thoughts were. Just a sense of admiration and thankfulness, and also looking for us for leadership during this time, which was not a new, which was a new feeling, a new insight for our connected relationships.
Khalif Smith, serving at Trinity. What I take away from the UMNext conference was very much echoing all of the sentiments that have been already expressed. We are excited to be a part of the Western jurisdiction, and more especially the Desert Southwest Annual Conference, and in that we have already been attending to these conversations. But also what I was most struck by was the movement of the Spirit of really, we got a sense and a presence of God's Holy Spirit being among us during the conversations there, whether it was the table talks or the worship, or just even in the free times where we had an opportunity to speak with people from throughout our connectional system. So I did leave with a sense of great joy and hope for our denomination and for our church as a whole. So definitely excited to be there and a part of the leadership team in the West.
This is Dave McPherson, Director of New and Vital Faith. I echo what everyone else has said. It was a time of hope, I think, for all of us, but also very an eye-opening event. For some, for their movement, it was, well, we're going to resist. And some of us shared, that's not an option for us because we've been doing that already for quite a while, and people are at great risk in our jurisdiction. And they, as it has been said, they do think the Western jurisdiction, we're farther along, but they also are thinking we have it figured out, which of course we don't have it figured out. And we're working on that. And I think as a jurisdiction, when we met the couple times by ourselves, we realized that we're moving forward as annual conferences, but it might be more difficult moving forward as a jurisdiction. But somehow we've got to move. And I think that's the process each of the conferences in our jurisdiction are doing, and then sharing that information with each other.
Julie, we're having the same problem with your sound again. Any chance you can put it in the chat box? Okay, Bob, Bishop.
Yes, so Bob Hoshibata, I participated in UMNext, going not sure again what we were going to receive when we got there. Not as David Devereaux said, I was, others have said it also, fearful that we would be handed kind of a pre-formed plan expecting us to debate whether we would sign on or not, but pleased that that was not the way we approached it. I was most proud to be a part of the Western jurisdiction, but also of the Desert Southwest Conference. Our team did a great job of reflection and also looking forward to the future, beginning our planning process, which I hope I'll describe a little bit later. But I thought we worked extraordinarily well as a team and made the determination to move forward into the future together.
And I know our 10th member of the team, Susan Brims, sends her greetings to all of you. Came away with so much from the UMCNext experience and will not be able to join us today, but is here with us in prayer. So please keep her in prayer. So one of the questions I keep hearing from lots of people is, and so now what? What did you all walk away from UMCNext with? What's happening now? So I'll just let each of you take a stab at that question.
Well, I guess I'll go first. This is David Devereaux, and walking away, I felt like we walked away with a path. The path isn't totally clarified, but we walked away with an understanding that it's time for something new and a commitment that we're going to do something new and first steps toward the kind of conversations necessary to keep moving down that kind of a path. I think the bishop will talk about some of those steps later, but I walked away really with the sense that we got work to do and what some of that work's going to entail so that we can create a new Methodism.
This is Sharon. I think it's really significant that we came away from UMCNext with those 4 main commitments. Mm-hmm. And so we have begun to talk about those. I know that the conference staff has been putting materials out about them. This is a great springboard for what will come next. Also, we know that the Forward group met the week before Next, so there was a significant conversation there, and so trying to bring some of those conversations together of groups that are meeting and working and see many things the same and some different. So so those are a couple of thoughts going forward.
Yeah, this is Kimberly Scott again. For me, I'm looking forward just to the potential for us to really recreate this thing. Conversation, but also bringing in the other cultural issues that we've kind of wrestled with as United Methodists, and how can we not fall into the same traps that maybe we fell into in the past as Methodists. And so looking at all perspectives and making sure that we are bringing people of color and queer people to the table as part of the conversations as we are leading into what's coming. So that's what I'm most looking forward to.
Any other reflections from the team about things you're hoping to see come out of this event?
If I understand it correct, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Paul.
UMCNext is just one expression of other possibilities that our local churches, our annual conferences can look at. And so not to see this as the only way forward or way next, but one of them. And I'm hopeful for the opportunity to include others in this particular expression of what UMC Next would look like at the upcoming event in September. I think someone else can confirm those dates. There's another gathering at the Church of the Resurrection where others, including lay and clergy, can come and have further discussions about what this would look like. And I'm excited to hear about those conversations as well.
Yeah, I think I'll jump on and piggyback what Paul just said, in that we are excited about the many different expressions of what could happen next, and are excited about hearing others in our annual conference and their voices, ideas and opinions about where we could potentially go. And the fact that the UMNext wasn't a rubber stamp on some Adam Hamilton devised plan of action, but that it was just the beginning of a conversation around full inclusivity, whether that is LGBTQIA or people of color, or those who are struggling physically or have those. So everyone is going to be, or we hope is going to be included in the conversation, so that we do not experience some of the, like Kimberly said, the pitfalls that we have experienced in Methodism in the past. So I'm excited about that.
It was mentioned about Church of the Resurrection and the event coming up in September. They're using their Leadership Institute to focus on the decision at General Conference in February. The goal is to get 1,000 churches to attend, and they're limiting it, they said, to 3 people from each church. So we'd like to see churches from our conference who are interested in attending, and we're trying to see if we can find some funds to make that happen for churches that need assistance.
I know that Bishop has a few things that he's going to share about one of the ways that our conference is going to respond. But I think before we do that, we'd like to take some of your questions. We've got a couple in here now, so I'm going to start with a question from Judy, who writes, I'd like to hear from Paul Cho at some point regarding US-based ethnic churches and what concerns/danger they feel they might have or be in if they dissolve or disagree. And I would also, kind of beyond Paul, open that up to other members of the team who might have some insight on that.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I can't speak for all the ethnic groups. I can't even speak for all of the Korean United Methodists. And I have 2 thoughts. One is that before or immediately after the special general conference, it seemed to me that the Korean United Methodist churches were organizing in a way that the Wesleyan Covenant Association has been organizing, which was a concern of mine, in that the church that I grew up in is going to desert me. What I learned, though, was that that's not the case, in fact, at this recent UMCNext event, there were other Korean pastors, not just Korean who are English speaking, but Korean pastors serving Korean ministries. Also, they're looking at ways that they can connect and share resources, and how do we stay connected in this movement forward. And so all that to say, the Korean churches are not all one unit, all looking at this from one perspective, but there are diverse voices there. They released a survey that they did for the Korean United Methodist churches, where they found that about 40, nearly half of the group were either centrist or progressive. And so there are a wide group of people who are also looking for ways to move forward together. I'm not sure I can answer the other parts of the question better than what I have said.
Other sharings or reflections on that question from the team?
Can you repeat that question one more time, Beth, please?
Of course. At some point, so regarding US-based ethnic churches and what concerns / danger they feel they might be in or have if the UMC dissolves or if they disaffiliate.
I know that one thing that we spoke with in particular at my table was about how many of our ethnic churches are churches that are really struggling financially and fiscally, and how a split is going to affect the most vulnerable and the most marginalized. So I think from one standpoint, we have a few different issues. We have the issue over just survival, right? Because many of our ethnic communities are just struggling to just survive. And I'm speaking from someone who born United Methodist in the Black church contingent, you know, who see most of my African American churches around the country, not just here, but are struggling. So there's a few different issues. And so they're so focused on just surviving. A lot of them are not even a part of this conversation. And so I think that's one reason why it's important for us moving forward, that we make sure that we bring the voices of people of color and marginalized community into this conversation, because what our concerns are in middle-class America is not going to be. And I think we should be very careful about making the assumption that that people are, because they're the same ethnic group, that they're of the same mind, because a lot of us are not of the same mind. But there needs to be ways for us to have further conversation. I know that Javier Oliveras has some tools that I think that would be very beneficial that the conference looks at to use to open the conversation up in regards to ethnic issues and racism and all of these different things that we need to make sure that are part of the conversation going forward.
And related, again, as Paul said, not being able to speak on behalf of all ethnic communities everywhere, and certainly recognizing that I'm speaking from a place of white privilege, but I have heard intense concern about if the structure of the United Methodist Church kind of has this inherited systemic oppression toward people who are not part of the Anglo-white majority. Is it really a system worth fighting for on one side? And then another concern is, how do we really make space in whatever evolves next to include very contextual and very different readings of scripture that might occur in our different communities, our Tongan communities and our Filipino communities and our Samoan communities, knowing that each of us in our own churches interpret scripture very differently. So it's definitely something to wrestle with. Great question. Another question, and there are kind of two parts, so I'm going to blend this question together because I think I want the whole team to hear it. There's both the question of, is there a way to help voices of our youth be represented or included in some of the future conversations? And this is not the same question, but a different one, but for y'all to think about. What about if I am an LGBTQ lay servant, how can I get further involved to add my voice in this fight? Especially knowing that LGBT lay servants are not really being heard. And I might broaden that question to say, how do I make sure that, or how do we ensure that the LGBTQ voices are heard, period? So good questions. I'll let the team go for those.
Yeah, Beth, I think as a team, we'd say that we've struggled with how do we let all voices come to the table? Because we are not of one group in the Desert Southwest Conference. So we want to move forward in a respectful and a loving way, knowing that we don't all agree. But something new we all believe is being birthed. How do we participate in that? How do we respect each other? And how do we give each other the space we need for whatever that newness is? So I think that's kind of the wilderness that we're in that we keep talking about. I think the bishop does have some answers to that regarding what we'll be doing at annual conference as well.
I think one.
Go ahead, Kimberly.
No, you go ahead, Cleve.
Oh, what I was going to say was that as a team, for us, those of us who have come back and had conversations around how do we include all voices, we have been really very intentional about thinking about ways in order for new voices to be heard and everybody's voice to be a part of the conversation. And so whether that is youth, whether that is elderly, whether that is anyone who really wants to participate, we are, I believe, engineering or trying to create processes where their voices can be heard and brought to the table and a part of this conversation. It is important, not only to us, but I believe to the broader audience in the church, that everyone who has an opinion about what is happening is able to at least share, and then how we gather that information will be put to a process as well. So again, to reiterate what David said, you know, Bishop has put together a plan for us at annual conference that we feel is going to be a very productive way of getting those voices to the table as well.
I would add, this is David Devereaux, I would add that the process we have is only valuable if it does bring all the voices to the table. We have to have the voices of youth. We have to have the voices of seminarians. We have to have the voices of LGBTQIA persons. We have to have the voices of all who want to help create a new Methodism. So our process is only good if we can have those voices involved.
And I think that's the beauty of where we are right now, is that we have the potential to do things the right way, right? And in a more inclusive way. And so anyone who says that they want to have a voice can bring their voice to the table. And I think we'll see at annual conference that we'll learn of the ways that people can bring their voice and be a part of this process, because it is not any means meant to be exclusive or be an exclusive club. This really is going to be an effort of our conference and everyone.
I just want to quickly point out as well that at UMNext, it was not, by no stretch of the imagination, was it all everyone who thinks the same. And I think maybe sometimes we don't highlight that, but there were people who may fall more on the traditional side, but they are willing to work for full inclusivity. And so I want to make sure that we identify that and speak to it, because it may appear or may seem that we just kind of went to a conference of folks who all think the same way, and that we are all just kind of forging ahead with this idealism, but that is not the case. And so too, in the Desert Southwest Conference, I believe we want to make sure that those who may have more traditional values or ideals, that they are able to be welcome at the table as well. And the idea is simply that we just do not want to harm anyone within our church, whether that is, and we want to be a church that is fully inclusive. So regardless of whether you're traditional in your theological perception or more liberal or progressive, that your voice can be heard as long as you're willing to participate in a church that is fully inclusive of all persons.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? All right, great. Sorry I missed pieces of that. To chime in on what the rest of you have been saying, one of the things that was important for me during the event was the voice of lay people. Most of the group was clergy at the event, but there were lay people there. And I think it's important to remember as we are going forward in this process that it's going to take the work of all of us to move this movement forward. Certainly the bishops will have a role, clergy will have a role, but also lay people. So I don't want that piece to be missed. And as it's important as we move forward to this new thing.
Are there any other questions related to, let me rephrase that. Are there questions that are not related to what is coming next in annual conference that you would like to ask the team? We could probably take one more question. Okay, I am going to invite Bishop to share a little bit about what is coming up next and how all of us can be involved in kind of the DSC next step.
Thank you for this opportunity to share. I've been sharing in various places now about this, the idea of how we might move forward at our own annual conference coming up in about a week or so. There are a couple of important things that I wanted to share with you. And those of you who have heard this before, some of you several times, I beg your forgiveness. But what I am struck with is that we have a history as an annual conference that we want to live into. And that history is that we have declared ourselves to be a welcoming annual conference. As people who are at UMNext have said, in many situations that conversations we had, we became aware of how much further along in the conversation we are in Desert Southwest Conference. And so we want to use this annual conference to lean on our history of being a welcoming conversation, that we have done some of the hard conversations in already that have got us to this place. The however part of my statement is that I think we have more to do. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is that we have planned with the strong leadership of Catherine Tang and her team, we have planned a series of 6 table talk moments that will permeate the whole annual conference from the first day to the last day. So from the first day to Sunday closing, we will have time at tables to talk about our denomination. Some of the past, our feelings and our grief or our concerns, our desires. But at the end of our time together, we're going to spend some time at table doing some dreaming about what we would like to see in the church of the future. We're not sure whether this is going to be a church that will continue to be called the United Methodist Church, or whether it will be something entirely different. And there is a great deal of energy and excitement about maybe dreaming about what this new thing might be, because we do see on the horizon the real possibility that somewhere down the road, there will be a determination that the 2 ends of the political spectrum cannot live together under the banner of the United Methodist Church. We don't want to be caught unawares, and we'd like to be prepared for that. But these series of conversations will help us to get from the honest reflections around our table about our feelings about General Conference 2019, as well as our own sense of who we are and what the church means to us. And then it will get to a place on Sunday where we will do this creative thinking together. I'm excited about what the team has planned for us. It's different, it's new, it's exciting, it's creative. It's innovative, and I think it will be really helpful to us to have this opportunity to talk honestly and openly at our tables together. As I looked at that whole range of table talks and understood the vision of where it would get us to at the end of annual conference, it felt to me that in order to allow those table talks to fully integrate all of us and involve us in conversation that really had the most hope for our future, that it would be counterproductive, I thought, to intersperse within those table talks some of the conversations about the petitions and resolutions that have been submitted that talk about our reaction to General Conference and our hopes for the future. So the first part of this first movement is I want to suggest that we be as bold as we can be and ask the annual conference to postpone conversations and votes, debates and votes about the petitions and resolutions that have to do with post-General Conference thoughts and future of the United Methodist Church, that we postpone those and we don't take those up during our annual conference session. I'm going to suggest that we instead plan to meet together in a special called session of the annual conference. We've selected a date that works for a number of reasons, but it will also allow us to meet together in time so that anything that we pass that is a petition to the General Conference in 2020 will be able to be submitted within the General Conference deadlines. So we are suggesting that this be, as far as possible, a low-cost event, a one-day event when we'll get together only to consider the petitions and resolutions about General Conference 2019 and the future of the United Methodist Church, the future of our denomination, or the future of our Desert Southwest Conference that have been submitted, as well as any other that petitions that come by a specified deadline. Those would be the only matters of business that we would conduct at this special session, one-day session of the annual conference. So some people have expressed concerns about it. Others have expressed support for it. I think for me, it gives us a chance to do our work at annual conference in the best possible setting, to do the complete range of conversations around tables to get us to where we need to be, to get us to the dreaming stage, and then to approach the special session with a more advised or a more informed approach to the whole matter of post-General Conference concerns, as well as hopes for our future as a United Methodist Church or as a church. So that's the first thing that I'm hoping we will be willing to engage our folks in conversation, and that there will be support at annual conference for this two-part hope that we postpone the legislation and that we schedule a special session of the annual conference. The second thing I wanted to share, which I think is more of concern to this group, I believe, I've been hearing from a lot of corners, what are we going to do? I want to do something, and I don't know how to get involved. So I'd like us to propose that we engage in what has been sort of called the DSC Forward movement. And this emerged out of conversations that we had in Kansas City when we were given some time to meet as an annual conference. When we met together, the 10 from the annual conference who were there at the Church of the Resurrection event, we began to brainstorm about some creative ideas about how we could actually get voices heard, people with passion involved in some conversations as well as some decisions about moving forward. So out of our conversation at Kansas City came a list of some of the concerns that we might want to address as an annual conference. And we find that, that list. And what we're asking is, of our annual conference is that the annual conference would support our formation of a Desert Southwest DSC forward movement that would invite as many voices as want to participate in the work of moving toward our future together. So I will quickly go over what the current focus groups are for this event. It is just a beginning of the conversation, but the idea is that we use some time at annual conference so that we actually begin to move the conversation in each of these 10 teams, and that we talk about ways in which we will enlarge the participation so that as many voices as want to participate in these 10 teams to begin with will have an opportunity to do so. Obviously, we are not able to pay for meetings together. We expect that many of these conversations will happen by Zoom technology like this meeting is, but our hope and dream is that this will be the start of our actually moving forward, inviting people who have passion for these different teams to come forward and to be included in the conversation. So in response to the question about young people, this is the way we will hope to engage them and invite them into conversation. Same about getting voices from the ethnic constituencies of this annual conference, and also about the wide theological spread here. How do we get everybody to be able to participate in conversations? How do we get them to be using their resources and their energy to actually move us forward? So that's, in a nutshell, that's kind of the vision. Let me share with you very briefly, if I might, the 10 task groups or 10 teams that we are we are thinking. These are in alphabetical order. There's a communications team. How do we communicate to the annual conference and beyond what we are doing and how we are moving? There's a connections team, which will try to connect with all of the many conversations that are happening around the denomination. What wisdom can we gain? What wisdom can we share with the other teams, or other groups that are meeting, even as we speak about the future of our church? There's a conversations team, which will respond to requests that we have heard about how do we engage in a holy huddle in our church or among our UMW groups. So those are resources that people are asking for. How do we share them? How do we encourage them to take place in our church settings? There's a disaffiliation team to respond to the GCFA produced document that talks about disaffiliation. The disaffiliation process that was adopted at General Conference allows or requires each annual conference to do some work to design its own unique process for disaffiliation. So the GCFA document is not meant to be simply received by a church that is interested in disaffiliation, but the annual conference needs to put its own stamp on the process to make it unique to that disaffiliation process. So we have a team that's going to be working on fine-tuning that process for the Desert Southwest Conference. We have what is called, I think, Dreaming of a New Methodism team. And this is a team that really wants to involve people in talking about, if we were to design something completely new, what would that look like? And I think it's a continuation and a building up upon the ideas that will be shared at that last Holy Huddle at annual conference. But those of us who might be thinking that the old is past and it's time to really start something new, this would be the team that would do some of that dreaming. There's a finance team, as it was referred to. Some of these events that people are wanting to participate in are costing us money. GCFA will not allow us to use conference money for that, so we've got to find other ways to help to pay the way of people who want to participate and then bring back some information from other conversations. The actions that were adopted at General Conference bring up some fears and concerns about complaint processes against our clergy. We want to put together a legal team, which will begin to talk about some of those concerns. How do we wend our way forward to protect our clergy from being subject to multiple complaints? How do we build a complaint process here in the Desert Southwest Conference that is respectful and not harmful or hurtful? So there's a legal team that will be working. There's a spirituality team because it was felt that all of this work needs to be surrounded in spirituality and prayer. Some people in our annual conference are really creative about that kind of work, and we want to give them an opportunity to participate in that way. So there's a spirituality team. There's a theological and mission team. Clearly, we can't do our work going forward without a firm grounding in what God is calling us to do and why we are standing as we are, as a welcoming annual conference, as a conference that cannot abide by the harm that is being created by General Conference actions. So we need to have a grounding in our theology so that we can all be on the same page, understanding what foundation God is building for us in Desert Southwest. There's a team that is dealing with amicable separation. There is talk about if we cannot live together in conflict, is there a way that we would be called by God to separate, but do it in a way that's amicable so that we don't separate fighting and arguing with one another, but that there be a grace-filled way of going our separate ways. So there's a team working on that. And I think that's 10. So at present, those are the 10 teams that we are going to start with. We've designed a process at annual conference to actually ask people who have passion and energy and commitment to do some of this work, to go off into a small group and select leadership who will be a part of the going forward from annual conference. That will give the teams an opportunity to make sure that they know what the purpose of the team is, and to make commitments, collect contact information, and begin to plan to do conversations as we move forward. Those of you who have heard this before or who have been a part of the conversations, what else? Is there anything else that I missed that we want to share at this time?
Bob, Bishop, there's a question about how people who are not delegates to annual conference might be able to participate both in these events at annual conference and then moving forward.
So in recent years, we have developed a system where we don't really have a bar of the conference, and visitors and people who are who want to observe are welcome to sit at tables with us. I didn't have any plan to change that, and especially at this time, when we divide up into small groups, my sense is that we would welcome their participation, since this DSC Forward movement is meant to be pretty much a groundswell of people from the annual conference. That will make it a little messy, perhaps, but I think that's how God wants us to be at this time. The more voices, I think, the better we are. The hope would be after annual conference, when we have a sense of who from the group that gathers at annual conference might be the initial leaders for this this team, the expectation is that there would be more detail about each of the teams, an idea of what topics the team would be dealing with, and then an invitation to the whole annual conference to participate in the work of the teams. Anything else or questions from the group about all that I've shared?
I will also share that annual conference is going to be live streamed. So if, especially our brothers and sisters in the Illinois area, if you want to live stream our annual conference, you are always welcome to do so. But for all of you, that is a possibility. Just go to dscumc.org/AC for all your annual conference resources. And I should also share with you that what Bob has just shared was released in a letter that went out to the conference in the conference newsletter. You can find that resource on the dscumc.org homepage. Check that out for all your up-to-date information about what's going on. And of course, we will continue to update you through our other online channels. So that's just what we will add to that. Other questions? Seeing no other questions springing forward and knowing that we are at our time, I am going to invite you all into two different closing activities. First, I wonder if you could just join me in kind of giving a thank you to the team members and to all of you for being there. Sign language round of applause. So thank you all for your ministry, service, and work. And I am once again going to ask you to pull out your smart device and go to www.menti.com. I'm going to share this with you, so my screen's going to disappear. And hopefully this will work. Maybe. That's not what I want to share. That's not what I really want to see when we're talking. That one. All right. So we began today by sharing our greatest fear for the church at this point. And now we are going to leave with a totally different but somewhat related question, which is, what is one hope you will take forward with her? Have the chance, go to www.menti.com and use code 354844 and enter that one hope you will take with you into the future. We see before us a visual representation of the heart of the hope that lives in each of our hearts. And we know that we are part of a community rooted in the deepest and most eternal hope, in God, our creator, in Christ, our redeemer, and in the Holy Spirit, which lives and moves and activates us for ministry. And so knowing this great hope is part of all of us, I'm going to invite us to unmute all of ourselves, which is going to just be crazy chaos nuts, and share in something else we all share, which is the Lord's Prayer. And whatever words are appropriate for you or language that is your language for praying this prayer, I invite you to share. It's going to sound like chaos and cacophony, which I also think is important to the kingdom building that we are engaged in. So kind of sit back and enjoy the chorus of voices and let us share this closing prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread.
Grant us today our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Power and the glory forever. Amen.
Amen. All right, friends, blessings, and we'll see you in the future.
Thanks, Beth.
Thanks, Beth.
Yeah.